Hi, Jen. All right, let's just get going. We'll call this meeting to order. It is a meeting of the CIP Committee on January 20th, 2023 at 12:30 in the afternoon. And we have a quorum. I think the only person missing is Karen Ann. And Karen Ann just joined us. So we actually have our full board today. Present to speak is our first agenda item, and I don't think we have anyone from the public in the room other than Phil, who's going to be presenting. And online, I don't see anyone. So we can move on to the CIP table update, which is, I'm just going to put this on the agendas going forward. And I was going to bring you, since after the last meeting, I did a couple things, like I fixed the problems with the EMS things, and I added a row, Erica, but I didn't print it out because I know today we're gonna get some better numbers for the school things, and so I figured out
Every other time is good.
every other time, yeah. So you should get that in your email next week, before our next meeting, which is on Wednesday, right? Okay, so the next item is the approval of minutes, and
I don't think we got any.
finish them,
No.
and I will take the link, but I forget how frequently we're in meetings, so I asked her to prioritize the last selectmen minutes over, and Kelsey will be working on those. I would think by Monday we've had them all.
yeah, okay. So we can move right on to the Board of Education submittals, and we have Phil Stevens here to present that to us.
All right, so if you want to share the Excel spreadsheet first, I'll just kind of fly through what that looks like.
Folks will give me 1 second while
Yeah.
I share.
So the Board of Education, this is their approved request. And we try to put the items into columns just like you do for your 5-year plan. It doesn't mean things, you can't move things, obviously you know that. But just as a sense of priority where things fall. And I'll go through, I'm really only going to talk about year 1 on this sheet. And so the two rows in green there those are things that were at center school that was renamed from CES classroom sinks and cabinets, and it's really under CES plumbing now. And then you see that there's a new HMS plumbing. Those are the only 2 new projects that are on here. And those are basically going to be repairs, and I'll share those when I get to the bigger document. So you've got the blue, pink, yellow, green, and orange, the different years. Anywhere you see grant reimbursement, a percentage in there, that means that item is eligible for grant reimbursement. And that is our current reimbursement rate, 63.21. And then the other thing I'll point out, and I think I've said this in prior years, the odd duck is that window replacement all the way to the right in the orange. It's not 63% of the 87,000 because only a portion of that project is reimbursable. It's like, you know, they'll reimburse you for the window, but not the construction or the work. And that's why that grant reimbursement is only 14,000. So there's quirky things like that in the reimbursement factors. There are a couple updated numbers on here from prior years, and I will tell you the 2 roofs, after working with the school building committee in Colliers, his numbers for square footage for the 2 roof projects are higher ones. He said that you should be around 850 for center school based upon cost now, and 1.2 million for hall. That's based upon current numbers that he's seeing for roof projects being done. So this is just an easy way for you to look at kind of priority. And then there's a little bit of good news in this, in that landing ramp replacement. That was the other item that the Board of Education wanted to put in year 1 for your review. And the good news is they voted on it. And then after that, I had talked to Troy at Public Works about the ramp, and it just, the amount of money it would cost to pull that whole ramp out and redo is really excessive. If that were to be a school building project there at Hall School, I think that would be part of the project, and then it becomes reimbursable. So I said, can we do something in the meantime? My maintenance custodians don't have the ability to do, or the tools. And say, they actually work together, and they rented a special concrete saw. There are sections, and you'll see it when you get to the pictures, there's sections that they cut out, and put forms in and re-poured, and it is holding wonderfully. Because usually as soon as it snows, it starts to crumble from our repairs. So it might have bought us some time. So I don't think, and I've said this to the board, if that's not in year one, from your CIP perspective, I don't think it's a bad thing. Because it's not, I should have taken a picture to show you, but it came out great. Like literally, it's the wheelchair ramp on the side of the building, and you
Yeah.
go up and there was like ruts in it.
It's not so cool.
And ruts like 3 inches deep ruts. So they cut out a big section and re-poured it, and it's been doing great. So that was like $1,000, I think. And it was, so if that's what we have to do for the meantime, until there's a building decision, that item could be probably bumped into a later year. Okay. So I will go through, and you should have, I like pictures. I'm sorry, I don't necessarily like the CIP forms. I'll share with you what has all the pictures. You want to find that, Erica? Yeah. So this is, and these are not in any order. It's just all the different projects. And I think all of these are the same except for the plumbing. So I'm going to cruise through these because I think they're pretty self-explanatory. You see them, and you're all bright people. So on this, you see the list of center school priorities that's on there. They are supposed to be kind of ranked, but you don't really need to see it that way because year one is really your priority. So you've got the clocks and the PA system and strobe. That's a security thing. They sell those systems combined now. So it's like you get the clock system tied to your lockdown system tied to your PA system. That's just the way they sell them. We did not do any updated pricing on those because it's not in year one right now. It's something that would be the future. And so you have placeholders in there. That's an old price that we know that's what it was. Okay. The second thing is the plumbing work that was previously classroom sinks, cabinets, and plumbing. My maintenance custodian, and this is really for obviously for center school, has come up with some things that are working well for just repairs of cabinetry. They are going to have to be done in the long haul, but the focus on the plumbing, we can't touch the plumbing. And if you look at those pictures on the plumbing, some of those things we've had plumbers go in and go, I'm not touching that. And the reason why is the shutoffs are not, we don't know if they work, and many of them are frozen, which means you have to shut off water to a section of the building, which means it needs to be empty. And oftentimes, and you're going to see this in a hall school picture, oftentimes there's an issue in the wall, so you then have to break concrete block. So this is really, the 20,000 is to continue. The Board of Ed has already put forward $5,000 this year currently for priority projects for each building. This is to keep that work going. And honestly, if I have money at the end of the year, I'm going to keep, this is not covered. This is just like, hey, what needs to be fixed now to make sure if we have something break, that we have a shut off valve, that we can shut it off locally. Because that's what you would do. So that's why it's really around plumbing now and not just, or the cabinetry, you know, that would be long-term, okay? Again, if we stay, you're gonna see it all. The heating project upper wing, that is, those are all steam, and you still have some old mercury thermostats up there. All of those would go digital, they'd replace all the valves and things. So that's the upper wing heat is different than the lower wing. The lower section of center school is all the unit ventilators, the upper wing is steam. And so those units are original to when that section of the building was built. The air conditioning in the gym has been on there for a while. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the space they use often when there's, you know, whether it's PE or it's assemblies or public, you know, formats. And when we had replaced the heating unit in that room, it was set up to be able to add AC using the same unit. And it's been a few years since we've added that heating unit. It's probably been, I think at least 4 years now, maybe 5. So, but it's something that can be done. The upper wing, Window replacement, those are all single pane in the upper wing. So that's one of the projects that is on there. There is lead paint on the exterior. So that would part of, I guarantee if this was, we redid this price, it'd be significantly higher. They'd have to have some remediation on the exterior of those windows, whether it be the caulk or any of that. It's all contained at this point. I hope I don't have to talk too much about the roof here because I feel like I've talked about the roof for several years. I think you understand where we were in that process and that it was stopped by the state. We are not leaking currently. If a leak does occur, we connect with Silktown Roofing and you know, do some sort of patching within our current budget. But that section, those sections of the roof need to be replaced. The air conditioning in the upper wing, obviously part of the 21st century school, you have ventilation and heating and cooling that's appropriate for a school building. It's hot in May and June, sometimes April, you never know. So putting some AC, that's actually the hotter of the wings. The lower wing has AC in the hallways. So that would be the upper wing. We've got number 8 is in there as paving the upper parking lot. We have, what is the crushed millings in there right now? It's been packed down. You know, it's not the best. You can't put lines down. It's something that I think we would have to have a special permit to do, but long-term, if we stay, it's something that probably should be considered. The playground, the poured rubber surface is what is in ARPA right now. So that's to pours, and it doesn't do the whole section, it just does a section of it. But you can see some of the sections that we have right now are breaking, and it's just where it's over the years, it's aged. Item 10 is the whole school generator. That center school right now has a rollout. It's just a small generator that would, you know, you can turn just the heat on or just something. And it requires someone to be there to gas up every 3 or 4 hours, whatever it is. So that whole school generator would run, and based on the number of times I feel like we've lost power in that school recently, this is becoming more of a priority in my eyes than it was in the past. Item 11 is something, again, long-term, to have some sort of canopies over our bus entrance and exits for students, people walking in, so they are not standing there in the rain as they wait for a bus to come in. Just a nice addition, but lower priority, obviously. Any questions about any of the center school ones before I cruise through Paul?
Yeah, I had a couple. So if the generator is becoming more of an issue, do you want to move it up from year 4 or year 5?
I don't think it, and I know this sounds strange, but until we know what direction is going to happen with the school building, we manage what we do. And I know this sounds crazy, but if we have to have a custodian sleep in the school because there's an expected ice storm, we gas up. That's what happens. We just pay them overtime to do that, and it keeps the building safe and protected. Really, where we get stuck is long-term storms. If you get a really bad storm, but you know you don't want to have pipes freeze. We would just have to make sure we keep someone there. And it's, you know, connecting with Public Works, can you get me a ride and more gas type thing?
Yeah.
Until we figure out where we're going. I think if we stay in both schools, that's definitely something that should be higher on the priority list. But again, beyond year 1, for the board's perspective, you could put all of these other items into one big bond. It doesn't really matter years 2 through 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in their eyes. There are items that they would definitely have a higher priority, like the things that are in the canopies are much lower priority, you know, than clocks and PAs that work,
Yeah.
things like that.
So on the parking lot, going from impervious surface to paving, I understand all the sort of, it's hard to plow it. It's kind of a mess. You can't stripe the spots and all that stuff. But my question particularly as the town goes to using almost exclusively salt on de-icing. And also just in general that the school's uphill from a lot of the abutters.
Yeah,
I would be concerned about salt runoff into private wells a lot, just by making that change. Because I know when paving, for instance, the main lot, when that happened, I'm in a butter and I immediately had problem with water in my basement and I never had before.
Yep.
So, I think that's something that, I understand the difficulty of it day by day, and I'm sure Troy could weigh in on that too.
yeah.
But I'm just, those two things happening, more salt being used and, the private well risk already. I'm just kind of
Agreed.
concerned about it.
The runoff the runoff right now is still an issue just because it goes where those stairs are, at the bottom of the stairs, it just runs into that. And we have the little collection area, and then they did some work years ago, I think it was actually during Troy's time, to dig out some of in the woods, there are like, I don't know what you call them, I see it as a trench. And I think it's meant for some of that water runoff, and it runs through, but that would have to be, if you did a paving project there, you'd have to have the proper drainage and make sure it's in there properly.
Well, you did that little there's like kind of almost a little retention drain or pond or whatever at the edge of the firehouse kind of area over there.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you did some stuff, I know.
Yeah.
I can see.
Yeah, and she's kind of jumped off the screen, but she didn't have that.
Who does?
Karen Ann.
Oh, hi, Karen Ann. Did you have your hand up?
I did. I was just wondering if I could get a better explanation of what the difference is between 2222 that says replacement of various plumbing and 2224 that says update of plumbing.
Were you looking?
That's in the regular sheets, right?
Yeah. This is the packet I got.
Is it number 2?
I think it was, frankly, I think it was two. I think it was a dupe because I saw that too. You had 20,000 both for year one.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering. If this is just a duplicate, I'm not going to worry about it, but there's two for 20,000 that both say plumbing. So I was just curious.
One is for center and one is for hall.
Right.
Or
but
should
No,
there were
no,
two.
both of these say CES. Both of them say central.
That's a dupe.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
I have a question. And so just clarification of two things. One, you said you don't have any current leaks. If you do, you would be working
We
with,
address them.
have you had any since this patch was put on?
One at center and one at hall.
Okay, and they were easily.
And honestly,
mitigated.
the one at hall is on the shingle side.
Okay,
So that could just be sideways rain. I mean, you just don't know why, and it's not ongoing, if that makes sense.
perfect.
So,
Because I think everyone agrees that the roofs need to be replaced.
Yeah.
And the only reason we did it is because we took, the town took projects that included a reimbursement to the townspeople, and that's the project that was voted on to spend over $1 million with money back. So the net result was considerably less. And so to change that was not the same project. It was a much more of a financial, I won't say burden, but impact to the town. So just so we can once again clarify why that is. And I think your list is not comprehensive of the list you've talked about in other forums off of that prior list. So
right,
if nothing were to happen with the school building project, these items are in this plan. But I think we'd be talking about a much larger potential bond of getting all of the things done at one time.
Yeah.
Instead of piece by piece. And I don't know about the rest of you, but it's stunning to see the things that are not reimbursable and the price tags. And for me, the ventilation and
Yeah.
reimbursement of
Especially
it.
after COVID.
Yeah, there's some programs out there, but for obvious reasons, we haven't.
you would be eligible for
Work.
business through OSCGI.
That's right. So because of the school current status of the school building committee, but the things that they choose is mind boggling to the rest of us, but they are the current restraints we have to work with. So it's eye opening what the cost will be if townspeople choose to do nothing in the future.
There's potential that ventilation could be added in the future
Yes,
because they've received some significant pressure
yeah,
from districts trying to put in ventilation that didn't have anything in it, and just the cost is just not, affordable for districts. It's huge.
And pre-COVID, no one was really looking at it in the same sense. It seemed to be a nicety to have.
Only if
To
you
be
were,
able to breathe.
only if you were
And
doing
now
a new
it's-
building or
Yeah.
renovation.
You looked at it as more air conditioning than a new ventilation system,
Right.
really, and so we
Moving air,
look
yeah.
at it in a very different manner now, so. I think
Yeah.
it's important as we talk about this process and continue to share those things specifically with the education request. The fact that the entire cost burden is on the townspeople without state input in the repair only scenario.
I also wanted to ask, because I know you had these flopped before, why we would do the window replacement after the AC on second floor. Before you said it should follow the window replacement, but I think you were concerned about power bills or something, maybe with
Yeah,
that.
just those single pane, you would do the windows and then you do the AC second.
Okay, because they're
Yeah.
flopped on this plan.
Yeah, and is it on this part?
One's, I think one's it's on both your spreadsheet and on the proposals themselves. One's in the, I think one's in the, is that what?
Oh, yeah, upper wing and windows,
Yeah, I see what I'm saying.
It's just like the painting, like you approved the painting for all school for the library. I'm not gonna paint that until the roof is done.
Yeah,
That money's just parked right now, so that's where long-term, and I'm gonna be on, I'm gonna just say more than what Erica just said. This is your start, right? But you really, if you stay in your buildings and you don't renovate or you don't build new,
mhm,
you are gonna have to have some sort of really significant plan that makes sense. Like, you don't do X before you do Y.
right.
Because you're gonna impact this. You don't put something in to only tear it up again and do it again. So you'd have to have that plan. AC, when do you paint, when do you do flooring, when do you pull up tile, when you do asbestos removal? All of those things have to be laid out in a master plan and much more than is in any of my documentation. If we go nowhere, I would propose to the board to pay for not a facility study as much as a proposal for how to manage it. Okay, so what are the projects? How would you rank them? And what's your proposals for order of actually doing them? Because you can only do so many projects in the summer, where some projects you can do throughout the year. We replace unit ventilators pretty quickly over a vacation, or things like that can happen. Just how many and what's the impact?
The other thing I kind of, reading through these, both schools, that I'm kind of thinking about, and when you can apply context when you're going through them, please do, is what if there is either a renovation, which is some of the ventilation stuff and some of the big stuff gonna be ground into that if it's at the hall projects.
Yeah.
And what would happen if there's a new school build and we're talking about other uses for these buildings, the things that you would want to do now, obviously plumbing is a short-term need.
Right.
But the things you would want to do now in service of having those buildings not decay too much.
I mean, there's always options for certain projects. OSCGR has certain requirements, so if you're gonna apply for a grant for reimbursement, you have to do it exactly the way they want. And I don't remember what year it was, because it seems like it's forever ago, but I had proposed to the Board of Finance to put a 10-year roof on over the top of, right, I think it was a 10-year roof. And the answer was, no, let's just go ahead with the full thing. Like, you could still do that now. So if the town said, and it's not anywhere near the OSCGR expectations, and the cost, because a roof over is very different than, because they're kicking money in, they want to make sure it's gonna last you 20 years. So there's things that you could do like that would buy you more time. Eventually, yeah, you gotta tear it all off, right? And start from scratch. You can't just keep adding layer on top of layer on top of layer, but there are certain projects that you can do that for.
Well, in that example, if it's no longer a school, it's not reimbursable.
Correct. And I have to sign off, and this is why they stopped us. I have to sign off and say it's gonna be a school for 20 years. That's on the application. You have to check the box and sign it. And if you sign it and then you walk away from the school, they're gonna get you back and they're gonna say, you owe us X number of dollars because you walked away.
Mhm.
6 years in, you walk away, they're gonna do the math and figure out what you owe,
Mhm.
which is understandable, right?
Yeah,
It's
right.
their investment too. But I mean, if you were to walk away from both of these buildings, and I just want to look at this real quick before I say this. I don't think there's anything on the center school thing list that isn't just an ongoing repair that would be a CIP thing that we could manage within the Board of Ed budget. We can keep, as a heater, breaks in the upper wing, obviously we fix it. We have MCOR come in and they fix the heat, so there's heat in the classroom. We pay for it. This list would fully disappear though. If you did whole school, like there's none, all these things would be addressed. It'd be part of the project. But if you walk away and you, from both buildings, I don't know that there's really anything on here that the town would have to determine is what do we want to do to maintain that building? And my suggestion, it might not be a popular one, is you have to determine some future of those buildings from this perspective of why would you put a $1 million roof on Hall School to only find out that a developer wants to come in and do their own thing, and there's an agreement that they'll maintain this section 1922 building, tear off the newer edition, 1980 edition, and they're gonna do something else, and they're gonna tear off that new roof. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
You wanna find out what its purpose is first, and then if you don't have a purpose for it, then you do have to figure out, okay, what is the minimum maintenance to maintain so it doesn't look terrible, ruin the interior of the building, things like that.
Mhm.
Those are things that you figure
Yeah.
out.
If I may,
Thank
step
you.
that ties back to the request from the Board of Selectmen to look at a facilities needs assessment. So once, and it'll be clear, once a project is defined and then potentially voted in favor of, we'll say, help us define the needs for all of the town departments and the facilities we have with them and how they fit into that schedule. And then take this list as a guide to say, if we're going to reutilize this building for X purposes, here are the things we need to address first.
Correct.
So it's part of a bigger picture.
Because I said, like, if you're good, and I'm just, this is pure example moments, this whole school one's different. At center school, if you were to put the town office building in there, and you are not gonna use the upper wing, would you replace the heater units?
Right.
Like, what would you do? What would we need to do just to, keep, if it's just storage, what do you need up there? Do you need minimal one rooftop unit and you just cut those off and then, those are decisions you have to
Mhm.
make. You just wouldn't do that without knowing what you're gonna do. And I think people see some of my comments as not caring for the buildings, and that's not true. It's just a matter of I'm trying to be wary of spending thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on items if you're going to walk away from them. Right now, we have heat in our buildings, they're not leaking. Our classrooms are in decent shape. It's the big things. The heating, cooling, ventilation, long-term needs to be addressed. The roofs need to be addressed. The 21st, we call it 21st century learning and natural light spaces, long-term needs to be addressed, but.
Jen?
Yeah, Jen, do you have your hand up?
It takes me a second to figure out how to unmute sometimes. So Phil, thank you so much for all of the stuff that you sent. And I know you wear a lot of hats. It seems like one of them is like building maintenance professional or something. What is the chance that the list that you have for both schools is, I don't want to say exhaustive, but pretty solid as far as what the buildings need for big stuff? Like if all of these things were done, what is the likelihood that there would be more big stuff coming after that?
So it's likely. This is, if you go back to the Fryer study, some of the things, these are like the high priority things that we know about, and there's other things in the Fryer study, I think that would need to be addressed as well. One thing that's not in here at all is any of the asbestos abatement. I'm a firm believer in long term, if you're gonna go get another 50 years out of a building, you need to take care of that stuff. And so we've done it. Unfortunately, we did it through the flood at Center School. That's how, how one abatement was done, in the hallway. And that was part of the insurance claim, but there's still asbestos tile in there. It's all sealed, it's safe, it's appropriate. We know about it, but that's not a project that's listed in here. And abatement projects are expensive, and so the same thing goes for Paul. So it's, what I've kind of said publicly is that you're looking at about $19 million between our CIP list and what's in the Fryer report for things that need to be done to take care of your buildings to get another 50 whatever years out of them. And some of them are 20 years, like a roof. But you're paying for it twice. That's why the importance of moving in, but into one building. But yes, this is not, if we, I don't, people also see this as a threat, and it's not. I have been very public about this. If there is a no vote referendum and it dies and there's no project, you're going to see a very long list from the Board of Education next year. There's no question about it. I don't think it would be the right thing to do not to do that, because there is a long list of things. It just doesn't make sense to do it right now until we know where we're going, because a lot of it would be addressed through a renovation project or a new building. At some point you walk away from a space, or you have to spend significant amounts of money on it. So yes, it would be pretty significant. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes.
You want to fly through Hall?
Oh, Melissa has her hand up.
Oh.
Melissa?
Yes, just a quick question. Thanks, Phil. When was the playground rubber surface last done?
Oh, it's been a while. You were probably on the board at that time.
Yeah.
That would be sometime between.
And that's just one section,
2017? Yeah,
Colin, I think.
and
it
that's
was
not
just-
even all of it, right?
Probably closer to 10.
Yeah,
What
it's
day was it?
it's been a long time. I can get that answer for you, Melissa. I really don't know what year that
10,
was.
11 somewhere.
Okay,
Uh, That stuff has lived its life too.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Yep.
But again, I heard you say that's at ARPA. So if they took action on that, that would come off of this plan.
Yes, yes.
And that is, well, it is at the school, it is a town playground.
Correct.
So
That's
it's not just related to the school, so.
Just not during school hours.
Yeah.
Correct.
But
Correct.
yeah, it's
Right, it's a
It's a
great
great
spot
resource.
for that.
It's the two we have.
and depending on the future use of that building, again, if a project goes through, if we know center is not in that plan, then it would still maintain in the town use, that it would still be accessible.
Right.
Space.
Well, I would think then all day public space.
Yeah,
And then you have to determine at what point, if it need to be replaced, is it worth replacing because you have River Road? Or do you just pull it all out and wood chip it or seed it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'd make the decision once it was the life, end of its life.
Jen, is your hand up again?
Yes. So, I just remembered one more thing I wanted to ask about center school. Phil, I think I heard you say in the presentation, about center school that it was not going to be possible to make center school, ADA compliant. Am I making that up entirely, or?
No, so you can make center school ADA compliant, but you would basically have to, and I don't know how the permits would go. I'm just trying to think if I have a picture in any of these.
It
that
would be
was-
significant.
Yeah, hold on one second, let me just see if I have a picture. So when you are at the front entrance, Okay, yeah. Look at, item 6, the roof project for Center School.
I'll pull out.
So if you look at the front side of the building where you see the 90-degree angle, sidewalk and that is leading up towards the blue spot,
Right here.
you would have to do, yes, you'd have to, in that space right there, you'd have to go put a ramp, and I actually talked to someone who is a school building, professional, and he came out, and looked at it, and we'd have to blow out the offices that are there, and we'd have to put basically a long ramp up and a long ramp back to make that upper wing accessible. And then it'd be just, the bathroom portion is actually easier. It's the ramp to the upstairs, or doing a lift, and neither one was easy because that interior wall where the stairs are it's too narrow. You'd have to blow it out. So that's the challenge of making that upper wing ADA compliant.
So wouldn't that be on the list as well?
It is on the grand list, yes. So it's not on my CIP list right now, but if we stay, 100% that would be on there.
Was that in the prior report? Their plan was strictly repairs.
I don't remember, but the number that we fell on at the time was a minimum of $250,000. It was a significant project, and it was bringing the building closer to the road and rerouting that sidewalk.
Thank you.
Taking out that bathroom. I mean, you'd have to design this. You'd have to have an engineer, an architect, and someone come in and design this. It was not a small task.
The canopies are needed, necessary in any way if it weren't a school?
I think it's always nice to be able to walk into a building under a canopy. The canopies that we're proposing are longer simply because, at the end of the day, you want to bring kids, bus lines out,
Yes, yeah.
they're under an overhang, right? Whereas if you're just walking into a building, I'm not sure how often here you would have a line outside of a town office building or someplace else like that. You just typically don't have a line like that. And because that's zone residential, I'm not sure what else you would be able to put in there. So if you want me to go through Hall real quick. Steve sent me 3 wonderful pictures from Hall School. This is a new one, and it's high priority. The $20,000 is going to be individual projects as priorities. The picture on the left is actually the one we're working on right now. We had a leaking urinal, and it's in the wall. So they literally had to come in, and that hole was widened. They literally had to come in, they shut down the water to that wing. They had to cut out the block. They worked with Troy to do some of this work. And to put new pipes into that section and then be able to put the urinal back up. So that's one urinal out of many in the building or toilets in the building. So when they're leaking, it might not be the extra unit, it might be coming through the wall. Those are things you have to fix. Those are now. So that's why the board put money right now towards that to fix those things, to make sure that we're handling those. The second picture, again, is just a shut-off valve that is totally corroded and frozen. And the same thing, the third picture is just a really corroded pipe. Yes, it's lovely.
And that's what we could see.
And that's what you can see. And so the 20,000 doesn't fix the building. I don't want you to think that. It fixes our priority projects that we know of right now. And one thing the board has said is because they have their non-lapsing fund, if they had to hit that for a priority project, they could. If something came up, they could do it right then and there. But Tracy Anderson made a great comment. If you know plumbing, the picture on the right could be $20,000. Because once you open up the wall and you find out, okay, it's coming from that pipe there, now we got to open up the whole length of the wall. And this whole pipe is rusted. Now it just, money goes fast in some of that stuff. I was talking to Scott Coleman from Colliers about this. If there was an alteration extension project to do a pre-K through 8 at Hall School, you would do new plumbing. you would probably just abandon these pipes and you would run new plumbing through the building. The second item there, the whole, and I don't know how this happened, I have no idea. That wing that was in, put in, I think it was 1980. When you're facing the schools to the left, that whole wing, there's no ventilation in that entire wing. So this was an estimate for $750,000, to be able to put some sort of ventilation in there.
So that's the wing that's being proposed that would be demolished.
If that were, yes, in the plan, in the concept plans to be demolished.
So tell me, situate me where that is.
So when you're at the front of the school, when
Front
you're
of
facing
school.
it, that whole academic wing where the fourth or the fifth and sixth grade is upstairs and seventh, eighth is downstairs, there's no ventilation there. So when the state during COVID said, crank your ventilation, we went, okay, let's go look at our ventilation. And we're like, there is none. There's nothing there. I had no idea why it wasn't put in when it was done. There's nothing there.
And I just want to ask this because I remember the governor's mansion. Are these those sort of like monk-like things, apparatuses or whatever that would be on top of the roof to do the ventilation?
It could be. There's a lot of different designs. Like you could do an individual room design, or and some of this stuff gets really high tech. When we were in Mansfield, we just toured Mansfield's new school, and you don't do operable windows because the ventilation is so high tech. You want to maintain all the pressure and everything you have for heating and cooling because it's so efficient. And so if you do an individual room, you have more control. If you do a rooftop unit, because as soon as somebody opens a
Right,
window,
okay.
some of that stuff goes out the window, unintended, I guess. And we actually started looking at individual units when COVID hit, simply because to do a rooftop unit at the time was just near impossible. And we also found out there's like this much room above the ceiling tiles in those wings.
Ooh, okay.
So to do ventilation was a significant challenge. So they said that stopped it for us, the conversation, and we just had to come up with some alternative, which we did. But it would take some significant engineering to do. So that's why the price tag is so high on that.
Okay.
The boiler replacement there, that we replaced one boiler, there's two that run that entire building, 60,000 square feet. So that boiler would need to be done at some point. You already know about the clock PA system. I would recommend you do whatever, if those ever get approved, you do them in the same year so you can probably try and get better pricing and installation, because you do them the same type of system in both buildings. That parking lot quote, I guarantee is low. If you drive through the parking lots, either parking lots, we've had several professionals just come in and say, there's no sense in chip sealing in here, doing an overlay. That parking lot's gone, especially the one in the back. And so all that material would have to come out and have to be totally redone.
Now that one is, I should listen for, shouldn't I?
6.5.
Is that one, that example, if the school doesn't continue as a school, that's that question of use, would a rear parking lot be needed?
That's yeah. A developer might come in and go, we don't need a rear parking lot we just have the parking across the street, and that's what we want. We want to put in an addition, or we want to build something, or we want to build a football field. You know what I mean? Like they could, it'd be on a developer at that point to, if it went that route. Again, the other thing is, if you do a school building project at Hall School, that becomes a reimbursable project. If you do it through CIP,
Right.
it is not.
Right.
So that's you spend a lot more money if you do things through CIP, because there's so many things that are not eligible. If you did your heating units through a renovation project, they're eligible. If you do them through CIP, they're not. That example is like, for you on those, it would have cost you $40,000 versus $100,000.
Mhm.
That's just on one project. That's significant. The locker replacement, the downstairs, that's the two locker rooms. The boards are covering up all the dents. The unit ventilators these are the ones at Hall that have not been replaced. We've actually gotten all of the ones at Center replaced. There are several at Hall that need to be done. Though I think the one that was done at Hall was done because it was frozen and flooded. The ramp is what I already talked about. That's one that even though it's in for year one as a priority, yeah, that is the whole section right there that we cut out. And so what was happening is where the posts are, the water was getting down in there. And so it just, any patch was ruining it. So they cut out quite a big section, report it, and it seems to be holding very well. So my suggestion would be that money could be put elsewhere. If I think that would be okay for now. Again, $95,000 reimbursed at 60% versus $90,000 reimbursed at nothing. The air handling units are the ones that control that fresh air intake, and it's really this is the section in the pictures that I show for the school building committee, where you have to climb a steep set of wooden stairs. It's in the library, above the library. It's above that hallway. That's where all that equipment is. And so that stuff would have to be either abandoned up there or come down piece by piece. And so the air handling units need to be done at some point. That's part of the MCOR book. We do have them serviced every year. They take care of them. They're working, but they're old. The tile floor replacement, some of that is asbestos and some of it is not, but it's there's a couple hallways that need to be done. The gym curtain, they're afraid to lower it because it might not go back up. It needs to be done or abandoned, one or the other. I think if you stay in the two buildings, you could abandon it. You don't necessarily have a space right now that is used two spaces in one, so that's the purpose of the curtain, right? We don't really have that at this point in time. We could just pay for the removal if we stay in hall school and don't join together.
Now, like for that, are there times where like boys and girls basketball are practicing at the same time on a half court?
Nope, they have their own separate times.
Okay.
Yeah, one is like, 3 o'clock and then one is 5 o'clock and they just try and flip flop. Yeah, and that's the same thing like with the concept plan for softball, baseball on the hall school site. They'd have to alternate because they're hitting into each other.
Mm,
And you get the field on the space if that were in, but would want.
yeah.
I think I talked about the roofs. Hall schools and an entire roof project. Jen was asking about, are there other things? Here's one, this HMS elevator modernization. I kind of chuckle about this because they gave us a quote and it was $151,000. Basically, all it is it's the components that get replaced and it doesn't impact the actual box, the elevator itself. So even though they call it a modernization, it's really, we're just talking about the wiring. Obviously, it's something that you need in hall school. And it's inspected every, whatever it's required to be inspected. I think it's every year or 2 years. That's done. If you wanted to do the box too, you're looking at probably when this was quoted a couple years ago, it was already on another $100,000. So it was like $250 for the whole thing. So I guarantee that price has gone up since then.
That includes the repairing the box or
The
the
modernization,
250.
they call it modernization and they're really not, it's what you and I might think modernization. I would expect to walk into a current elevator and see a new interior. That's not the case.
Mhm.
They're talking about the electronics behind it and what you can't see. That's the modernization.
But when you said the price is probably more like 250
That's with
with the box.
box.
Okay,
And I should say the price was like $250 with the box when that quote was gathered a couple years ago.
okay.
Jen has her hand raised.
Thank you for being the facilitator. Phil, you said that, the elevator is inspected. Does it pass inspection based on its current status?
Yes, we couldn't use it if it did not.
Okay,
This is one of those things like the fire panels that the older some of this stuff gets, our heating units, unit ventilators are no different. Things get old and they're hard to get parts for. And so once you can't get parts for something, you get stuck. And so this is where, I think with the ADA comment you made earlier, question you asked earlier, when they used to have a lift at center school, and then they couldn't get parts for it anymore, and they had to buy a new one, that was the end of it. It just came out. And so that was, this is with the elevator, it's at that point in its life where it's gonna something, this is one we cross our fingers on. Because if it fails, and you have a student in the building with a wheelchair, which happens, you need to be able to get them throughout the building. So.
I was gonna ask you if you always have years where you have students or faculty with wheelchairs or requiring, if not a wheelchair, requiring elevators or.
Every year as a superintendent, my answer has been yes.
Okay,
I don't know about beyond that, but I can tell you that I would say safely for the last 8 years, I can identify a student that's been in the wheelchair that has needed access.
I would say on a daily basis, anything could happen in a gym class for someone who may or may not have fallen off the pommel and suddenly needed crutches in the elevator.
yeah, and we're not
Right,
even
yeah.
talking about the public, we're just talking.
Right, we're just talking about day to day, and I mean, it's, there's other reasons to use the elevator, but that's, primary. The parking lot pole is really minor, there's damage to it. I don't know, we don't know if it's from the foundation, but they monitor this. It's not a really good picture of what the damage is, but it gives you a sense that it needs to be replaced. That's
It is?
one that we might just eat ourselves.
Is
one
it
summer.
6,000?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just peanut.
it's a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. And again, that would be one that you'd probably make sense to do if you did the parking lot. You'd do that at that point. And then you've got the canopy over the gym entrance sidewalk, and down the side there. That's where all the buses load and unload right there, so. That's the current list. And we'll see what happens if you're gonna get a full monster list next year. I think it's gonna be pretty significant, honestly, if we don't have a project. The things that are in the prior report that, brick repointing is not on your list for either building. Both buildings need to be repointed.
Right now?
Right now,
Ooh.
today. It's big bucks.
Is that more than a roof?
I don't know that answer. All I'll tell you is when I walked the building the first time with Scott Pellman, he said, your brick needs to be repointed. I said, tell me more about that. And he said, very expensive. But it's because it's not grout, sorry, what is it? It's
Mortar?
mortar. The mortar, once it wears away, and we have this in one section of center school. And we had a cost estimate just for the chimney section, because there was a section that was, water was penetrating and it was coming down a classroom wall. And that has nothing to do with the roof. And so that was something that we had to, we repaired. It's a short-term patch, a couple of years, he said, but long-term, you need to do all of your, you need to repoint everything. Otherwise, you're gonna have that problem all over the place. So.
Carrie has her hand up.
I don't know if this is a philosophical question, more about the nature of CIP or what, but going all the way back to the very first thing, the pipes, you had pictures of 3 different pipes, or the urinal, and then 2 pipes, and the one on the right was particularly janky, and I don't even know what's holding it in a pipe shape anymore, honestly. My question is, how long have these pipes looked like this? I mean, this is the first year that this has been submitted. Like, that pipe didn't look like that just overnight. It takes a long time for pipes to get that particularly corroded. So my question is, like, I understand about reimbursement differences, But again, something like this, also like the lockers, that was another one that just sort of, stood out. Like, kids are hard on lockers, I get it, but they don't get like that with just one school year. So why is it that these things get so huge and so big? I guess is my question. Like, why do we have pipes looking like that instead of them having been maintained or taken care of earlier, in years earlier?
I think a big portion of that is prioritizing things. So like the lockers, in my eyes, have not been a priority. I think that board has probably been on those lockers for probably
I
20
started-
years.
I started in 2009, we were talking about it then,
Mhm.
maybe Christina before that. so.
Yeah. I remember
It's always
that.
when
That
things
was
come to
fine.
CIP and you're prioritizing heat over lockers, you're gonna take the heat, or you're gonna take a roof, or you're gonna take a safety related item. Some of the items like pipes are things that, since I've come in, I've said, I don't wanna see any more duct tape, fix it right. And if it's gonna be expensive, you just need to let me know, because we need to do things right. And I had the same approach as a principal. And so, unfortunately, some of those things are very costly, and there's not a huge repair budget that's just within the Board of Ed budget. It's big projects, and so touching that type of pipe that might be corroded, if someone says, look, it's still hanging in there, it's in decent shape, this is a bigger priority, we're gonna pay for the bigger priority. That's kind of how the approach we've taken.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
Karen,
Yeah.
to your comment, so from the town side, not the superintendent's request, having sat on the Board of Ed and here in this seat, it's been the direction of CIP, Board of Finance, and other powers that be to move things forward, to then take the projects that are brought forth from the superintendent and prioritize those to fit into the plan as was desired at that time. So it was often saying, okay, you brought us these projects, we think this is something you should be doing first, and here's the funding to do that. So then the superintendent's charged with taking the funds we do give him and only being able to do a handful of things. So it's a big picture of what the town has decided to put towards funding. And I think now we're seeing the results of realistically underfunding our facilities.
Well, as soon as you get behind.
That's right.
So if something has a 20-year lifespan and you inspect it and it's still in incredible condition, you can say, hey, I'm gonna buy another 5 years of this and inspect it again. You move it out 5 years. But if it should be replaced then and you don't do it, you're in a cycle right now where you have so many large things that need to be replaced. And it's not the block of the walls, it's not the paint of the classrooms, it's not, you can cover asbestos tile as long as it's sealed, you can put carpet over it. But if you have a flood and you need to pull it up, you gotta address it, right? So there's a lot of things now that are at a point, you're heating, you have no ventilation, you have no AC, you need new roofs. Those are all huge items. Just huge items. And it's, that's something that if you do those things over time, every couple of years, you should really have a big project to maintain it.
Jen?
So kind of to this point, if regardless of the outcome of the whatever project is voted on, going forward, it sounds like it would be prudent to have some kind of recurring like expense in the budget for building, not maintenance, like even bigger than maintenance. I don't know what the word would be, but some kind of like a checklist of how things are or something like that. So that when we ask, when someone is sitting on CIP 20 years from now, they're not asking the same questions, like why weren't the pipes maintained or something like that.
Yeah. Jen, Eric and I have talked about this, and I think Christina, you talked to Eric about it in the past, is having some sort of facilities manager. I think one of the best things we did, and I don't remember what year it was to hire MCOR to come through to identify all of the mechanical equipment we had in the schools. They put it in a notebook, they put the serial numbers, they put the life expectancy and its current age. If you move forward with a building project in this town, whether it's new or it's renovation, you need to do that from day one, and you need to stick to it and say, okay, here's what we have now. This is the life expectancy, and this is when it should be replaced. And that would make your job on the CIP so much significantly easier to address things long-term. And to know that if you put that roof off for $500,000 and the following year you have another big project, you're gonna get behind, you're never gonna catch up. So I've advocated for that, no matter moving forward, that was a big thing for me. And I would say if we do know, there's no projects moving forward, it's gonna be, I would call upon this committee to sit down with some sort of outside person to help do that evaluation, so you could see it and you'd understand, like, okay, here's the long-term plan now. This is what it's gonna cost. They're identifying the priorities, because look I'm the superintendent, but I'm not a facilities director. I wear that hat. But I'm listening to outside professionals say, this has gotta be done. And what's a priority? So we just need to make sure we have that plan moving forward long-term, no matter what we do.
So I almost think this is talk about the horses leaving the barn, but feel like that will also be a part of the cost of not doing business. So you have the 19 million, whatever it is, for all of the projects that need to be done. In addition, you're gonna have this regular maintenance that's gonna need to be done because of the age of the buildings, but also this entity you're talking about to come in and do all of this stuff and give us this timeline about what should be done every year. Like, that seems.
I would say you would need that even with a new build.
No, I
Otherwise,
agree with that.
problem, right? Like.
I agree with that. I agree with that, but like, there's gonna be way more stuff on the list of 2 old buildings versus 1 new building. I think we should be proactive and do it with a new building. I think it would be great, to walk in day one and have this kind of set path as to what needs to be done when. Almost kind of like the dump trucks. Like, there's a 10-year cycle. We know when things need to be replaced and we actually can plan to do it. But it seems like it would be Mount Everest if it was, 2 old buildings versus even a reno or something.
And Karen Ann had her hand up too. Or it's not up now, though. Did you?
Oh, well, it should have been up. I don't know why I took it down. I probably just did something. I just have a generalized question, since I am still fairly new on CIP and haven't been through a lot of this. If the town does vote down a new school and we do have to renovate center and hall for this $19 million, what kind of projects would get reimbursed and which ones wouldn't?
So if you look at the spreadsheet that she was showing on the beginning, there's a column that says reimbursement in the percentage. And
I
you
only
see,
saw 2 of those was the thing.
and you're hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Can I share with this committee?
Yeah.
We'll pull up the section of the Fryer report that listed for both schools. There was a clear report in the Fryer report. So instead of sending you the massive package, we'll send you just those projects that were identified in 2017. And so you can get a sense of what they recommended then and what was reimbursable. If I could comment to Jen's point, that needs to be done for all of our facilities. And if this school building project, I think Jen and I definitely agree on this school building project has taught us nothing. We need to determine how we're going to execute any of these plans. We need to have the plans in place and then executing them. So there has been studies that laid out a plan that have been paid for by the town, provided to the town, yet not executed. So we have to think about how we do business and what we prioritize. There have been many years where the priority is to maintain, what that looks like to people is different, and keep our taxes low. And it's very difficult to properly maintain and do all of that at the same time. So taking that data and actually executing a plan and putting a policy in place that helps you to execute that plan, I think is probably the most key thing we could move forward with some direction with to town
Yes,
leaders.
yes. I just have one more question, then I will put my hand down. So the Fryer report is from 2017.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not more familiar with it, but 2017, so that's according to my math, a long time ago. So,
And pre-pandemic.
yeah, so not only probably are the things on the list worse than they were then, there's probably like a whole host more things on the list. So again, like prioritizing stuff as kind of a discussion point with townsfolk who are, trying to make these hard decisions. There's a 6-year period where you have solid evidence. This is someone who came from the outside and said, these are things that need to be done to your schools. And what we have now is a result of not doing them. So like that, to me, is a pretty compelling point as to, even if it's only just maintenance or a priority list of things that need to be done to your schools every year. That to me is pretty compelling. I can't wait to see it.
We have done
You've
some
done
of the
some
things, Jen.
things, yeah.
It's just that the list is so long.
Yeah,
That's the issue. And you're doing it for 2 buildings. So, when you're replacing heating in one classroom for $13,000, you're spending in the CIP budget, 25% is gone now of your budget in one project. And you're not impacting anything educationally, you just put heat in the classroom. So those are the challenges that come along with, the funding piece of this. It's really hard.
Anybody else have any questions? Any other projects to look at? No.
We have
In the
the,
Well,
SBC.
we have the SBC, yeah, and that's gonna be filled too, right?
Unless Mike's around, he and I talked pretty quickly about it. You want me to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks,
the
Phil.
school building committee put in, a request for $200,000. And really, you see 3 purposes there. Within that, they have $130,000 for a bond interest payment, $45,000 to purchase the $2.5 million note, and $25,000 contingency. So it's a $200,000 request, and that $130,000 for bond interest payment could be 122, it could be 145. We were trying to give some plan for something that if there's a project, we asked, I think it was the financial advisor, what do we need to do for a CIP for year 1? This is a deal breaker. This is funding, in my opinion, you have to have in your year 1, otherwise you don't have a way to fund that next step if there's a positive referendum.
after February 1st, there will be a defined project. So we worked off of the fact that all of the projects had a first year note at $2.5 million. So that's why we were comfortable with submitting 1 year. This is a 5-year plan. I think after February 1st, it would be realistic for SBC to be able to then provide numbers to this committee to plug in for years 4 through 5. And it may not be that many depending on the project. I think it still may be out for 4 more years, but maybe only, maybe 1 less. But after February 1st, I think we could then give you a set of concrete numbers based on the financial information that we received. But this was, every project had the same cost in year 1 because it's dependent on cash flow. And that's why we landed on this note.
I think with this funding, the referendum date is around the end of March.
March 28th.
So I think it buys you enough time, or the Board of Finance enough time, that if you were to put this in your year 1 and it passes, you're moving forward, right? If you put it in year 1 and then the referendum, it fails, I'm not sure we would have time for a second referendum and still be able to put a grant application in June. It doesn't happen that fast. So this money, then I think the SBC would say, we would like to see this number altered, because obviously there's no bond payment. They don't need that $130,000. Would it be zero? I don't think it would be zero, because we would have to continue some of that work. But it's nowhere near what it is that's in there right now between the bond payment and the $2.5 million note.
And,
Right?
and if it fails though, is there a scenario where you start going to the $19 million just fix both schools option?
That'd be up to the school building committee to determine if it's done, or if there was feedback from people like you put for the wrong project.
Mhm.
That would be the determination. The challenge is you can only put in the school grants in June.
Oh,
So you,
Lose a
for
whole
the
year.
other things that, like, they have monthly grants, but if you're going to do a renovation project or a new school, it's once a year. So that's why I say the funding would have to be enough. If the school building committee said, no, we didn't complete our work, it failed, we got more information, we're gonna need a little more money to get to the end. We'll, you know, you could do another referendum in July if you wanted, but I couldn't apply for that grant until June of 24.
mhm.
So what funding would we need for work in between? Some communities have had up to 3 referendums before their project, so they'd have to discuss that, but there's time between the referendum and the budget hearing where the final adjustments would be made at the Board of Finance meeting after, so that you could still make adjustments and not pass along unnecessary costs to taxpayers.
Mhm. And I don't know, I mean, this is getting ahead of ourselves, but let's say whatever the option is passes and 200,000 is the right number. Would it be prudent for us to put aside extra money, knowing that in the next few years that bond payment's just gonna go up exponentially? So that we could help pay ahead for some of that, so it's not like a cliff.
Yeah. After February 1st, we'll be able to tell you what the costs that are not part of the project, right? These payments are not part of the project. They're not built in, so they're born solely out of the town's resources. So we'll be able to give you what those interest payments are. So yes, maybe you could take a couple of those that would be in year 3 or 4 and put them early on to pay them now, so as to lessen
Or put it
the
in
first
reserve
payment.
to then use
Yes,
later.
yeah.
Whatever.
So put aside the funds now and pay later.
This also disappears.
That does disappear, but I think
And
what
you-
you're saying, could we save some of the money now in a fund and pay it later? And kind of balance out the hurt, if you
Yeah,
will?
yeah, to ramp it up
Yeah.
instead of like going off a cliff in year 3.
Yeah, because we'll be able to tell you what all of the bonded interest payments are based on the information we have now.
We went for level principal off the examples we did not level that. So you could do the jump right away and keep it consistent, or you could do you hit that 3rd or 4th year, there's the big payment, and then, you know, your taxes the next year are only increasing $100 versus
Yeah,
1 year it's 600.
but yeah, but that's just on its own when you put all the other things, if this happens, I'm assuming we're gonna put some other things off. And then all that stuff's gonna get pushed to that year to when it does go down. That's one way that we could, I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Looking at all the things we have to pay for.
I think that in combination of figuring out, okay, what do we need to put into these buildings? If it's 4 years, do all these projects disappear, or are you gonna go, you know what, we're leaving OSCGR behind, we're gonna do our own roofs. We don't need the grant reimbursement, because you might be able to put a roof in for cheaper. That's still a 20-year roof, just not to their expectations that they have. Those are considerations you have to
I mean,
process.
it might be that we get a $19 million bond and do all the things.
That's right.
Or we get a $10 million bond and also build 2 firehouses.
Right, or realize that.
Or $40 million.
Or $40 million, yeah.
Or when we start to do real current day calculations on these items, the number is not just the Fryer number with a simple what we think will be an escalation, but a real dive into the work that needs to be done. So we've been using that number as an estimate based off the Fryer. It could be significantly different. And what I think is important that people are watching this or hear our conversation, understand is the number that Phil's been sharing, the do nothing.
The 19 million.
Yeah, already has the reimbursement rate baked in, so it's not then gonna drop by our renovation.
Local cost is 19 million.
Yeah, I mean, that is our cost,
That's
so
the minimum.
that's the important part for us to hear. As residents, that it's not then gonna be 63% less than
Mhm.
Right, correct.
In the bigger picture, and I don't expect an answer tonight, and a lot of it revolves on the Board of Finance, is the CIP expenditures that we've had typically per year, which I think is $600-something thousand. Is the school gonna be on top of that,
Yes.
or part of that, or do you not buy anything else for 20 years and only pay for the
No,
school?
I think that I mean, that's the thing.
There's
I
the
think we
cycle,
still
that's
have
the
to keep
cycle.
buying the stuff, and I think this is on top of that.
Yeah, but that was
There's
my
no way around
expectation as well, that you can't stick your head in the sand and say, well, we'll just ignore everything else, or you
Right,
have to stay at that 600 and
right.
something thousand, that the world doesn't, you know, start and stop unfortunately on the school project.
Right.
It's a big project in town, obviously, but there's still gonna be public work needs and library needs and fire department needs and town hall needs and so on.
That's
With that
So-
idea.
Defer,
That
defer,
idea.
defer. Only, I think we've learned nothing in 20 years. Deferring everything because we did one thing just has a snowball effect that, you know, is not the responsible thing to do. And none of that includes major road work and all of the things that we are obligated to maintain to taxpayers. So to me, sure, it has to be extra, and we have to think about what we do in between. We didn't do any large projects because we had a library bond, and that was $3 million.
The idea of doing,
So,
the idea of doing the notes, a little, whatever stacked in the front though, does sound like something to really consider instead of waiting for the,
I mean, we just have to see what all the cards are. We don't know,
if that should happen, yeah.
yeah. But either way, I mean, it sounds like 19 million is probably the lowest amount that we're talking about. So I'd be curious to see like, what do the 5 years look like with a $19 million bond and with a 60 million and with a 70 million and with a 50, I guess all the different. You needed a 50.
I'll work with, we'll get the numbers for the 5-year plan based on the financials that we have, and you can plug them in and see what that looks like, because the bond payment doesn't come out till the end, the first payment, at the end, the rest are the interest payments, but they do get larger because we're
Mhm.
borrowing more,
Yeah,
so, but not nearly as significant as a bond.
I just said I wasn't gonna do the additional work until we knew we had to make the list. If
Right.
nothing happens, that'll be the time to go, okay, we need to hire somebody now to come in and help evaluate all these projects. And that's really what Friar did, because, and those numbers in the 19 million were, Jen, I think you were asking about this. Those numbers were escalated from 2017 to dollars now. Scott Hellman looked at the projects and did escalate if there was something that was not, current cost. He knows all those things from his experience. So the 19 million is today's dollars.
I think it was somewhere around 13 or 14 million in the
At the
prior
time.
study.
Yeah,
Did that include the roofs? That plan? that
yes,
study?
but it was not that cost.
And it's not that
Roofs
cost,
are
but
through the roof right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty much doubled since.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I want to make sure my points on the library bond, it's, we shouldn't have bonded for library and then forgot everything else. We should have done that project and then continued other things. So we can't pick something and boost it up and then do nothing else until we're done paying for it. It just, our town is still moving forward, and, all of those things make a whole community.
Karen, yeah.
If the town does vote yes on a new school, schools take time to build. I don't know what the time frame is, 6 years maybe? What would need to be done to Center and Hall to make sure that they could still be maintained during that time that the school was being built? There are things that would still have to be done, right?
That's what we're doing right now. So within our budget, if there's anything that breaks, we're fixing it now. And some of the fixes are, hey, that's gonna buy you a year, and some of the fixes are, that's gonna buy you 10 years. It just depends on, if you can't get parts for it, you gotta fix it. So this summer, we're doing sidewalks and fire panels. Because you need them and are already approved in your plan, they're safety related, they've gotta get done. But unless it's something that was safety related, it's not in year one. The plumbing to me is something that has to happen, because if you have, and we're on pipe number 2 that's frozen, and flooded. If that continues to happen, that's an added expense. Like, let's fix those things now, because it might save us in the long run. But we're trying to maintain with what we have right now, until there's some sort of decision. And even within those 4 years, again, it's gonna be the town deciding, what do we want to do? Do we want to put money into a portion of a whole school roof or none, or a portion of center school roof, or all or none? Those are things that you'd have to determine. What you won't get is grant reimbursement on those items though, if you're walking away from it.
And the projects that Phil's bringing to us at CIP are $10,000 or more. So there's a lot more things that are happening. They just come out of their operating budget.
Correct.
So we just don't see them here, and we don't talk
Maintenance.
about them. Yeah, or they're small enough that he can take care of it.
What are fire panels?
So when you walk into a building and you see that panel on the wall that has all the lights on it, and it
Oh,
tells you the
okay.
different zones, and it's connected to the smoke heads. So when Stu walks into the building and goes, smoke head number 7's going off, we gotta go there, he knows where it is.
But it's not connected to sprinklers because we don't have them.
Correct. But it's another proprietary thing that they're expensive and you're required to have it.
Mhm.
If you don't have it, your fire panel's down, someone's staying in that building and doing fire checks every, whatever it is, hour, 2 hours, something like that.
Jen?
So if this is off topic, please stop me, but I think collectively, what we have said, even if we don't realize it, is there's some need for kind of like strategic planning. I feel like that's kind of our job by default, because we look ahead and, 5 years down the road, but to use all of the resources we have, we keep talking about these facility studies, we talk about ongoing maintenance, we talk there's no kind of entity that talks about the vision for what's coming up. And all the departments have their own priorities. So not that the town needs another committee, there's a lot of committees here, but I feel like something like that would be a good addition to tie into us, to Board of Finance, to Board of Ed, to bring all these giant projects together.
Agreed. Was there ever a strategic planning committee?
I think one of the tricks to this whole process, though, is your strategic planning is only as good as the planning on the departmental level. And that's in part missing. Because a lot of departments don't think that far ahead, or don't see the ability to think to project that far. I think we have to start with changing the thought process there, because we're very focused on an annual budget and not, what I mean, not on next year's budget. Some people, they may be thinking about it, but there's no sharing of it.
Well, I think from our committee, we've only started asking about that. It hasn't been necessary because no one's really, you do what's right in front of you, do what's on fire. And that's typically the year that you're in, or the year that you're planning for.
Sounds right.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, you're 100% right.
Yeah, I'm glad I heard that. Thank you. I'm just kidding.
I wrote
So-
it down.
And it's not for discussion now, I guess, but it just seems like that goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. And Steph, to your point, changing mindsets is really important because this stuff is gonna just keep happening over and over again, like Groundhog Day, if we don't
I
do
know,
something differently.
And I
I'm
think,
not disagreeing with that.
I know, I appreciate the point.
the departments provide what they're required to. So if we maybe take the off season when the budget is complete, we have a lot of work where CIP just goes home and we don't do anything. We wait until January, we come back and we work feverishly. If we try to use that off time to work on creating a strategic plan and what that looked like. And so there are new requirements and then those will come to us. Each of those departments will change their mindset because that will be required of what the town is going forward. And we put something in, work from a town perspective to put something in place so that we have to start there. And then the implement, I can't say enough. If we do all this work and it's just up to the, 6 or 7 people who are at the table, it means nothing but a load of paper that we spent hours working on. It has to include implementation practices.
One of the app, oh, I'm
Melissa-
sorry.
Melissa's had her hand up for a while. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, thank you. Going to Jen's point too, wouldn't hiring, the town hiring a facilities manager be part of that?
Yeah,
I think that's something that has been talked about and, needed for a long time, as far as I've noticed.
I think it would be a person to help lead us in the direction, but that person may or may not be a resident and a townsperson. And so I think as part of our government control is keeping those decisions local and having that person participate in the process of help guiding us towards a strategic plan, because that facilities piece is just one part of it. I think so. One of the additional voices at a table would be beneficial.
well, because I just want to dive in right now and say that strategic planning doesn't have to all be painted Caterpillar yellow or John Deere green. That, it could, if we really want to be kind of visionary thinkers, I think we could start thinking about what kind of town do we want to have in a 10-year plan? What kind of the things that fit in the cracks or don't fit into any department at all existing, like quality of life for the kids, quality of life for teenagers.
That's the plan of
You know.
conservation and development. We
Right,
do have
right.
the foundation of that.
Well, we do have the foundation, but when we do the COPD, which is due to the state every 10 years, I don't know that there's any ongoing mojo for it. It's like, we did it. We don't have to worry about it for 8 years out. And
No, it's
then
just referencing it.
it's
as
a
we want to-
reference and it helped a lot during certain battles we've fought in town. But it's as far as how we're thinking as town stewards and, or people of the town, I think there's a lot of areas that don't fit into CIP thus far.
Mhm. I think it's up here and Ann first.
Yeah, I just want to say that I completely agree. If we can get departments to start thinking ahead, because I will tell you, as chair of the library board, no one, since the library has been around, as far as I can tell, ever thought past this year's budget. This is the first year I have made them sit down and think about a 5-year plan. We really, we're a little town. We don't have that much money. We just don't. We really, the fire department seems to do pretty well, and public works in terms of knowing when things need to be replaced and stuff. I know for a fact the library has not done anything like that. So if you were to go to some of these places and say, hey, we want to see what your future looks like, would we actually be able to get anything from anybody? Steph was saying that people don't always look to the future. Would tell people they have to get part of this?
I think that's what Erica was saying. I think at the half year, not in the budget season, because that's a crazy time to ask for it.
And
Right,
we're
but
just-
what I'm saying is, sorry, I missed what was said, sorry.
That we're just, the group just having this conversation is enough to start pointing us in direction of, let's not keep talking about it. When we're done with this 1 year, this 1 5-year plan, let's start moving forward in that. Let's start making the change instead of talking about it, right? I think we all are in agreement and it's a good place to start.
I think this is a great place to start, and I think everyone is agreement. I'm just wondering how we get other people in town involved.
I have a thought about that. So I feel like to Steph's earlier point, I'm not even just talking about fiscal 10-year or however many years ahead like, where do you want to see your department in this many years? And it even if it has nothing to do with money, I can't even make anything up at this point, but because I don't want to replicate also the work that CIP does. I think that would be a waste of time. A strategic plan to me means like, where do you want your part of Wellington to be in 10 years or whatever the guiding question is. And have people really think about that. And I think that would be encouraging to people because they're asked a different question than, okay, what projects do you want to fund in the next 10 years? And how many are going to get voted down? Like, I feel I've gotten that sense from folks, from meetings I've seen and from people who've come to CIP. This is a different question, and kind of back planning from there seems to me to make a lot of sense. But that's.
You said it on our first field trip. I remember
Yeah.
you saying.
Yeah.
No, but that's not a long time ago. I mean, I think it's.
Yeah.
The time is now. I think it's a good idea.
If you want to email that to yourself, you can put it on screen so they can see. It won't allow me to email it at this site. I think CIP should have a budget for a master, an evaluation of all your, and I know maybe it comes through Erica, her side, but until you know, like, if no one, I said this in, I don't remember what meeting it was, it seems like I've been in meetings every day, but sitting with the library board, it was ARPA, just saying that, like, asking the people that are, you know, education expert. I'm not a facilities director, I don't have that expertise. But when you give me that MCOR report that says this is 40 years old and it has a lifespan of 20, I can then say, we need to fix it, right? The facilities person then, if there was someone, they could oversee all of those projects and they could help you prioritize it. Hey, I've looked at those units, this unit's good, this unit's good. These 5 are horrible and they need to be done. Like, that's gotta be your priority. But until you have that information, you're gonna, you know, I don't know. Carrie Ann, can you tell me how old the library roof is? Do you know?
It has not been touched since the library was built 16 years ago. Nothing has been done. And we were recently told that because I think it's a shake roof, that it should have been at least treated every
So,
And I
5
think
to 8
Phil,
years.
asking you or myself or Phil, we should be able to we could clearly answer that because there'd be a professional who would provide us with that information, because that is within their scope of work and that's in their wheelhouse. And we are working diligently to go out there and learn about facilities the best we can while juggling 15 other hats.
and decipher quotes
Yes, yes,
in a field that we're not experts in.
yeah. And so
I understand all of this, and it would be really nice if all of this could get put together into one big, the entire town and not just here and here and here and here. You know, I don't know how much hiring a facilities manager would cost, but it would be nice to have somebody overseeing the entire facilities in town.
$100,000, but you know, but it's, you know, we have to at some point look at how we're spending taxpayer dollars and what we're getting from them and what taxpayers are getting from them. And where we decide to put funds and what is the best way to spend them, and is just bringing in the lowest number at a budget the best use of our dollars. And I think the answer is no. I want low taxes. I think that's fantastic. We all want that. But all I can see from my vantage point is that it's doing us more harm than good. So putting all of that together, coming up with a long-term plan. So I would suggest we stick to our 5-year CIP and then start to talk to Jen's strategic planning comments and see if it's an offshoot of this committee, if it's a whole new committee, and what direction we can do to help facilitate some real action moving forward.
And as far as the facilities manager goes, I think it's kind of like a good executive director. They can kind of, in a nonprofit, they can kind of pay for themselves, because if you've got someone who understands bidding and understands when you do things and when it's economical to do it, you know, that can have a huge positive effect on CIP planning and everything else, I think.
Just more on that, if you Google Permanent Building Committee Connecticut and look what comes up, and trying to find the charge of the committees is a little tougher, but New Fairfield popped up, that's basically said they're in charge of all construction. It's a volunteer committee, typically made up of some, if not all, people that are in the trades. That you might have a mason or electrician, a general contractor, a real estate person, whatever it would be, that they have, compared to my knowledge, a lot better expertise in the buildings. They know who to talk to, know what the lifespan of certain types of roofs are. Ellington has a permanent building committee.
But they have a facilities director as well, correct? I think
They have the permanent, I just Googled permanent building committee and Ellington
Right.
came up with some minutes
Yeah.
and things like that.
But I think they have staff that probably works directly with that committee. And to our point, I think that's beneficial.
But that might be a free intermediate step, if you can find some volunteers to start evaluating kind of what we or the departments collect in terms of what the status is around town of, you know, what needs to be done, what's the priority, what are the estimated costs, which are always changing. I think you'd be hard pressed to, you know, well, you know, go to the board of finance, hey, we need 100,000 for a facilities director. It'd be a great thing, but, you know, trying to pass $100,000
I think we have to
expenses
stop,
at a time.
I think we have to stop being afraid of telling the townspeople what it is we need. And let the townspeople see if they find a benefit in that. And so I think year over year, there's been, I know from my time, and I'll let Christina speak for herself, I've seen a need for this, but it's always, no, I pull it back because it's not a good time to ask for $100,000. And I kind of kick myself for not doing it on day one, and then every year after that. So, you know, maybe with where we're at there, you would see that the benefit would be different if we had someone in place and stop and let the townspeople see that it's different and weigh in. It usually gets stopped before it ever gets to them in a budget vote. So that's.
Jen?
I'm a big fan of free, and Stuart, that sounds amazing. I just feel like if it was an actual position in town, that person is absolutely accountable for what is going on. It's hard to hold a volunteer committee accountable for ongoing building maintenance and knowing some stuff. Like, there's always a way to say that's not, I didn't know that, or because legitimately, maybe they don't know that. Whereas if we hire someone for expertise, then they should know that. And if they don't, then there's, you know, avenues we can take. I feel like it's way cleaner to have someone who we employ to do that. And I understand 100,000 versus nothing is amazing. That would be great. Or whatever the cost is going to would be. But I don't know. That's just my point. I don't know how to wrap it up nicely.
Yeah, again, and the volunteer, I think working in conjunction, I think that's great, but somebody has to be on the ground managing some of these projects that come to facilities. Back to Phil and I, if the volunteer committee has a day job and they meet at night to talk about what they're gonna implement, who's making it happen during the day? Phil, myself, our public works director. So I think,
Christmas Day.
that's right. I think putting them together is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Melissa?
Yeah, just real quick, you know, I just don't think it's fair that Carrie Ann has to get all, like, for the library and, you know, for an example, you know, to know all of the information about the past of the library as a volunteer, you know, just like with every other committee, or Phil having to go do all these other things that are in addition to his, you know, actual job. And same with you, Erica. or Troy, so it seems like lately, that's all we've heard in town, that all these things that a facilities manager would be really useful.
Yeah.
Think of the energy we could free up
Right?
for the
I mean-
21st century learner.
And it goes beyond the things we know about. I mean, we have nothing on our list for the old town hall. But we know there's things that's have to, and the senior center hasn't submitted anything, but I'm sure in the next 5 years, they're gonna need something. And sometimes it's just a change of people, but different people come in and don't know and that's not their interest and they're volunteers, and
Mhm.
then 5 years go by and suddenly there's another, this has been going on since forever, but
Forever. Right,
and we haven't been, like, since 2009, I have been trying to increase the local spend for CIP. And if that's, it's only been in the last few years that we've actually been doing that. And it's going up, we said 10%, which is huge compared to what it has been. But that's like, on this plan,
Well,
that's not gonna get us anywhere.
prices have gone up like crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
boats have gone up like,
But so I think you tried to put it into place, we actually did with your help. And then the townspeople approved it. So when we actually put something there and let the townspeople vote on it, they surprise us with their support. Or not surprise us, it's when the 7 or 8 people at the table stop it and say, no, we don't think so, instead of letting people have an opportunity to talk or voice their vote on it. They supported the increase wholeheartedly. I think our last budget was almost, again, a 2-to-1.
yeah, don't sell them short.
No,
I have to leave.
Yeah, that's why I just raised my hand. I have
Oh.
to too. Sorry, it's 2:15. I gotta get going.
and Carrie says, I got teaching to do.
Well, we'll see you all on Wednesday. I think
Yeah.
Wednesday's library. Is that okay with you,
I'm
Carrie?
glad we had that conversation.
I'm hoping so. It's still early in the semester. I'm hoping that I can still get out of my class a little bit early and make it for the 5 o'clock. If not,
Okay.
I will be on Zoom. I was on Zoom Wednesday night and today too.
I'll move to adjourn at 2:16.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.